Hi, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Kate. Today is a really special opportunity to take a moment and think about the solstice. And we've invited some of our area's most beloved individuals to join in conversation. Trudy Goodman and Jack Kornfield, who are not only connected to Spirit Rock, but also inside LA. And they've both had tremendous life experiences as authors, their doctorates, they're Buddhist practitioners, and they've helped create sanctuaries for practicing mindfulness. And I just want to take a moment before I start with all my questions to welcome the two of you and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you.
So could you both share, we're going to just take our time. Can you share a little about your work and your life philosophy?
Our inner life philosophy, did you say?
Inner life or life, however that.
Yeah. Okay. No, I heard. Yeah. I'll start out. Especially since it's Hanukkah right now, I was born into a Jewish family, Reform Jewish family, and yet Buddha Dharma, the Buddhist teachings, have really been the foundation for my whole adult life. And so I'd say my inner life is it's really appreciating the light and the love that comes through each tradition. Introduced to Hindu practices with Ram Dass, have Muslim friends who celebrate Eid, friends of African descent who celebrate Kwanzaa, and obviously, Christmas. So I feel like this is a time where I appreciate the light in each tradition, and also my own personal inner life, I think, has been formed by Judaism in terms of a spirituality that's centered in the family and that really values education and learning and study. And then on the Buddhist side, really learning more. I'm not saying it's not in the Jewish tradition, but I didn't practice Judaism. Reform Jews, Hanukkah means latkes and family gatherings and potato pancakes, that's what latkes are, and gift sharing. We don't do a spiritual part of that other than loving each other, which is the most important part. But with the Buddhist practice, really learning how to work with my own mind, how to observe my mind, how to be mindful, learning practices to cultivate joy and love and compassion and equanimity, and really very, very deeply grateful for all those practices. And they have really supported my inner and outer life altogether.
Wow, that just really spoke to me, that idea about learning to kind of, work with your own mind and then harvesting from all of these beautiful traditions, just further enhance. Wow. And Jack, anything you wanted to add to that, or how you found yourself in this field?
Well, a few things. I'm reminded of Ram Dass, since you mentioned him, when he was asked by a woman early on when he was teaching, still with his white robes and beard, and the guru Baba Ram Dass, and she said, "Aren't you Jewish?" And he said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, what about it?" And he said, "Well, I love all these things in the Jewish tradition, the Hasidic masters and the Kabbalah." And he said, "But remember, I'm only Jewish on my parents' side," which was both witty but also profound in a way, because we have our history, but who we are is so much bigger than that. So I grew up in a scientific family, Jewish, also Reform Jewish, and it was quite troubled. My father was brilliant in many ways, but he was also paranoid and violent, abusive. So he had these different dimensions. And when I got to the university, I was studying pre-med. I was going to go to medical school. And then I took a course in Asian studies. And this old teacher, old professor from Harvard, wonderful man, Wing-Sit Chan, sat cross-legged on the desk sometimes. And he started to teach about Lao Tzu and Taoism and Buddhism. And he said, in Buddhist teaching, there's the teaching that life has suffering. I'm nodding. And there's a path to the end of it. And I sat up in my chair and I said, okay, I was just in organic chemistry. This is the chemistry I need. I needed to know how to work with my own trauma, my own emotions, which I didn't know, my own anger, my own longing. And in some way, I got very much interested in the Buddhist teachings. Ended up going into Peace Corps in a Buddhist country to work on these rural medical teams, and then went into a Buddhist monastery. And I got the education that I needed. It wasn't there in the Ivy League. It was there. How do you work with forgiveness? How do you manage anger in relationship? How do you tend the traumas of your heart? And so that became critical for me. I learned it, and then I came back after some years in Asia and met Ram Dass and Joseph Goldstein, Sharon Salzberg, and people who became part of this huge loving family that we've now, Seva is also a part of, that we've now joyfully become connected with.
And I actually want to chime in with something that you had mentioned earlier, Kate, which is how on earth did we find ourselves on this path? Jack just explained his sort of origin story that way, but mine came in such a different way. It really came through the experience of giving birth, and it came through my experiences as a mother. And right in childbirth, I had a kind of mystical experience that I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. I was 22, just turned 22. I didn't know anything about labor and childbirth. And I also didn't know anything about what it meant, what I had seen when I had this big opening. And it wouldn't have happened today. I think it happened because I was alone, laboring alone, which wouldn't happen in a birth center, in a hospital, at least in America today, I don't think. And really, out of that experience, there was another experience a couple of years later where my daughter became dreadfully ill with spinal meningitis. She was in a coma. I was told she was dying. She didn't die. She's fine. She's happily married. I have grandchildren. But during that time, when she was so ill, I had sort of another spiritual experience of understanding that compassion was, God was really the activity of compassion, which we're going to talk more about today, of service and care, which I saw the doctors and nurses at the hospital. And that experience really, that second experience definitely changed the course of my life. Like, wait a minute, I have to find out somebody who knows, who understands this dimension of our consciousness that I didn't ask for, look for, but in the stress of those moments just happened for me.
And
I'm trying not to get emotional here. That sounds like a double birthing happening. Yeah.
But I knew nothing at the time. You know what I mean? I didn't even,
Yeah.
I thought that's just what happens when you have a baby. I didn't know everybody doesn't see God and have an experience of the interconnectedness of all beings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
And there's some way, I'm so loving that you're talking about this, because we are at the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere anyway, the longest dark night.
Mhm.
And people think, that difficulties are just problems. But what we're talking about is that they also become a gateway from the small sense of self, from a more limited identity. If we turn toward them and get the outer or inner support to face or go through them, then that which is not limited by this small self, that sense that we're held by the universe, we're held by the divine, that very deep trust starts to grow in us in the most beautiful way. And I think there's something about that in Seva Foundation itself. All right, let's turn to the place where people are suffering, and through that, let there blossom compassion and love.
Yeah, this is just usually these are conversations I have, and I do them with intention for the staff and for the people who follow us, and I feel today there's something deeply personal about what's happening, and I very much appreciate what you're talking about, because one of the things that was intimidating about joining Seva was the sense that, not being enough, not knowing that was I contemplative enough, was I thoughtful enough to be good at this and to be able to take care of the fabric, right? And sort of thinking about how spirituality can really take on different meanings for every person. And I think that's a wonderment that I'd have for the two of you. What I've appreciated, I've followed both of you, and I follow Spirit Rock. And Trudy, at the end, I want to talk a little bit about the book I know you're going to be publishing soon. But for people that might be intimidated by this, what's the significant thing that we should know about being spiritual?
I think of what Ram Dass said, Kate, when he really said the whole of the spiritual path is the movement from the head into the heart. And in a
Yeah.
way, you just embodied that when you said, I like to have these interviews accessible for the staff and the team, but today, and then you really are expressing the fact that today it's really touched your heart.
Yeah.
And so that I think Ram Dass said it so beautifully that we all have so many rational understandings and knowledge that we've learned in school and that we've been taught to learn and retain all this information. But the spiritual path is really about the heart, about love, about trust. And that's the hard one, really, the trust piece. But to me, that's what we work toward in our practice, trusting that just the way things are is enough. And you spoke about your fears of not being enough, and that I've certainly been plagued with those fears my whole life. That sense of never quite enough practice, never right, all of it. And my first teacher was so welcome to me when he said this was a Korean Zen master named Sansanim, Venerable Sung San. And he said, he was a Zen teacher, Zen master, and he said, Zen mind, his definition of Zen mind was that it's enough mind. It's that trust that who you are is enough, that whatever ingredients, whatever's happening in your life right now, to be mindful about that, to know it, that's enough.
Yeah.
Then there's the next moment, right? And then there's the next moment. But anyway, I think that's for me the heart of the spiritual path. And I guess one more thing too, which is being open, because my dad was a scientist, a physician scientist. And so I was really trained in empirical evidence-based, you don't believe things that aren't facts, and things aren't facts unless they've been proven. Anyway, you get it.
Yeah.
Have some trust in the invisible world that sort of is underneath and part of the invisible part of everything around us. That is that when we are willing to receive the moment fully, that which is usually invisible to us becomes visible. We can see the love in everything. We can see the trees offering, endlessly giving, but we don't see those things just on the surface.
So, yeah, let me chime in here too. When I first went into the monastery to try to figure out, well, what do I do with my fear or my anger, or how do I make a loving relationship, the things that were not in my regular education, but that I needed because I cared, and how do I heal myself? There was a lot of self-improvement in the field, came to become more patient, more steady and concentrated, more whatever it was, more mindful and so forth. And there was great value in it. It's just like learning to play a musical instrument or something. You practice meditation, or you practice mindfulness, or practice compassion, it grows in you. But the thing that's changed over the years, and I saw it for Ram Dass as well, and he did it with so much humor because he had this kind of vast perspective about life that was quite empty and humorous and not so attached, that he himself could be the subject of his stories and tell the worst things on himself and laugh about it and say, this is just being human. What I found happening was the shift from self-improvement to love. That in the end, it wasn't about perfecting myself. The self doesn't get perfected. It is the way that it is. And it wasn't teaching people to perfect themselves. The point isn't to perfect yourself. It's to perfect your love. And that love means including all of your messy humanity. And when you do, it turns out the messiness sorts itself out quite a bit, but not completely. And you continue, as Ram Dass would say sometimes, oh yeah, I still flunked the course. But he'd say it with such delight and humor that you just see it as sort of the human dance that we're in, all held in the great heart of compassion.
Mm. Beautiful. The human dance. That's a beautiful imagery. And I think what I'm wondering about is for people that are hearing us or listening in this today, what are some small steps, right? What are some things that folks could do in their daily lives to be more present, listen with our hearts? Because I think we've heard that phraseology often, but there's a segment out there that's like, yeah, but it's sort of like not quite getting the beat to the music. It's like, I intellectually know what it's telling me to do, but do you have simple things that folks could do who might be a little, maybe aren't as immersed, or this might be their first interaction with this, with this information or proximity to someone like yourselves? Because, you guys are just lovely. I'm feeling the love over the Zoom. So I'm just wondering, what would come to mind in terms of how to help people listen to their hearts, how to help get on that path?
It's a great question, because it's so easy to say, like Ram Dass would quote his teacher Maharaji saying, love everybody and tell the truth. It's easy to say that, but oh my gosh, that is really hard to do. So where do you start, right? I think that's a great question. And I think a good place to start is, of course, at home with yourself, starting with yourself, because it's really axiomatic that the relationship we have with ourselves really determines the relationship we have with other people to a large extent. So beginning to be a little bit mindful about yourself, maybe doing some mindfulness meditation, taking a class, doing some mindful walking. You don't have to really do anything different except maybe set aside a little bit of time for meditation, because you can be mindful doing anything. Mindfulness can go anywhere with you, and it really is just about awareness, what Ram Dass called loving awareness. And that loving awareness, you can be remembering to be present. Listen, it's very easy to be present in a moment, but it's just hard to remember to do it. So we have so many habits and things, but just to try to remember to be here now. We've heard that phrase. And what does that mean? Just opening your senses. What are you seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling? That's the truth of this moment. It doesn't have to be anymore. So you can just start with that, noticing how it is for you, noticing if you're liking or disliking what's happening, noticing if you're spacing out. How are you being present with experience in your life? And that's something that can be done in any activity, really. And ideally, we would be doing it in any activity.
Then you brought up the question that's related to living this in our lives about what it means to be spiritual. And another language that I might use for it is that we live in a culture that is very often characterized by the absence of the sacred, that we're busy with everything else, not to judge it or that's bad, but the sense of mystery, of beauty, the fact that we're here, that the sun is there, the moon, that plants grow out of the earth under the, the snow and ice. How did it happen? It's miraculous.
Yeah.
And we tend to forget that. And then we get into a judgmental mind, trying to improve ourselves, being judgmental or self-judgmental or so forth, or others. There's a little story, Ram Dass told me I tell too many stories, but that's like the pot and the kettle, of a guy who was going into the grocery store, and another man was coming out with, they crashed into each other, and the guy, sorry, the guy was coming out of the grocery store with bags of things, and somebody crashed into him, and they fell down, and the tomato juice splattered across the sidewalks, and the eggs broke. And he started to yell at the guy who was coming in, like, "What's the matter with you? Are you blind?" Really angry. And then he looked and he saw the fellow had a cane, a white cane, and in fact, he was blind. And the minute he saw that, instead of being angry, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we ran into each other. Can I help you?" Even before he cleaned up the mess. And that's really what it means to see with loving awareness, as Trudy says, to be able to see. And the practice that I like for this is the practice of loving kindness that we both teach, and Sharon Salzberg and Ram Dass and so forth. So that when I'm walking down the street and I see people, and there might be a judgment or irritation that arises, it could happen, just possibly, right? And yes, dear. And I'm a sort of speed freak type guy. So if somebody's in my way, okay, get out of my way. I'm trying to get my air, do whatever I do. And then I pause for a moment. It's like that sacred pause or that mindful pause. I pause for a moment because I notice it. And then I look at that person, or I'm driving, I look at it, and I see them as a child at 4 or 5 years old, with a kind of brightness and wonder and innocence that we're all born with. And then this quality of metta, loving kindness, maybe they safe and well. I see them differently in an instant, and they become my doorway to love. You know, it's like I want somebody to get in my way. I need somebody that I would habitually judge in some way, because they actually become the gateway for me to go, oh yeah, there we are, in that beautiful sense of love together. I could be on an airplane reading my book, you know, and in my own world, and then look up and do 2 minutes of loving kindness for that teenage girl there, and that old man sitting there, and that young fellow in a suit, and a little bit of metta for each one. And pretty soon it feels like we're in a family. You know, that hasn't said a thing, and the plane lands, and I could say, bye, you know, we had a great ride. So that's a practice that I love to work with as a daily thing to kind of uplift the heart.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know I was doing that when I lived in Baltimore, and the traffic from DC to Baltimore was ridiculous. And I noticed that if I was following a pal and they did something silly, I just think to myself, so-and-so, that was a silly move. And I just allowed it to be what it was. And then I found myself pretending like, well, what if everybody in the traffic jam, I knew them, rather than being a source of hostility. So I found myself doing something like that, but I would have never drawn that bridge, because, you know, I would have never thought that that was an aspect of what you were just talking about, that's a way of bringing that to the moment, and to, you know, bring in the humanity of the people around you. And that's a beautiful image of picturing people as their young selves, because how many of us are very accepting of children, and we you know, we care about them, and we're forgiving, and we're curious too. Oh my goodness. If it doesn't take us on a weird, what would you want to speak a little bit about grounding practice? Is what does that phraseology mean? Grounding practice, what would that be?
Well, to me, it means being grounded in my body and in senses. And because I can't feel my body yesterday, and I can't feel my body tomorrow, right? I can only feel my breath, my body, what I see, hear, taste, touch, smell. I can only feel that right in the moment.
Okay.
When we talk about grounding, I think of it as being grounded in this moment, but it often takes place by feeling literally my feet on the ground, my bottom on the chair, my back on the cushion, you know, by being in the body and connected with the ground. And what I love about sitting or standing or walking kinds of mindfulness, even meditation, is that, you know, you've got your feet or your bottom on on the ground, connected to the earth, whether it's through a chair or the floor or whatever. But you're also, rising up with your spine and your head. So it's like the body becomes a bridge between heaven and earth. And to me, that's very poised, balanced, grounded.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take that long. You can be in the middle of difficulty or hurt, and you can take a mindful pause, really a few seconds, to just pause and feel your feet on the ground, or your bottom on wherever you are, something. Come into your body, take a couple of deep breaths, make some space, and then you return to what you're doing, or you continue it, but in a different way. And the other thing that helps in a very practical way is, especially if you're in difficulty, is to ask yourself, take the mindful pause or the few seconds, and then say, what's my highest intention? What's my best intention? And there you are in a conflict, in a conversation, or you're trying to sort something out, or there's something difficult. You pause, quiet yourself for a breath or two, and say, what's my best intention? And it connects you to your heart, different kind of grounding, if you will. And very often, there you are, they're right or wrong, you're going to fix, and you say, well, my best intention is to sort this out, or to come together, or to make peace, or be, love that person, or whatever. Something really good arises, and it changes your tone of voice, and it changes your demeanor, inwardly or outwardly. It informs you, and it brings you back to what really matters.
I'm going to use that the next time I have a teenage daughter on her way to college, and I'm finding myself in a lot of that. And I think that is for those of us that do social justice work, I think we can get very caught up in a perspective, or, we feel the urgency, we feel that people need something and we're trying to get it to them. And so, but asking yourself about that highest intention is such a wonderful strategy to not only de-escalate, but it really reconnects back to purpose. It reconnects back to that original. This has been a master class for me. This has been a beautiful conversation. Trudy, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, if you don't mind, before, because we only have a few more minutes together, but would you mind, before I ask a favor from the two of you, tell me a little bit about, I think you have a book, and would you share a little bit more about what that is and when we can expect to see it? Because Seva will be sharing that information on our website and through some other channels.
Okay, so I've been working on a book, which is a book, it's a memoir. It's really, we have so many wonderful books of teachings, including all these fabulous books that Jack has written. And so I didn't really want to write another Dharma teaching book. We have plenty of those. But sometimes people would, one student asked me once, how did you get the way you are? And I thought, okay, this book is, how did I get like this? It's really a memoir of how I came to be who I am. And it is, like a memoir, it's not an autobiography. It really it focuses some on my childhood and then some formative experiences, not so much on my work. And I feel there's lots of themes to this book, but I often think of this quote, I have it here always, from Saint Teresa of Lisieux, who said, love only reveals itself as you, this I'm translating from French, it only reveals itself as you move through everything that is in the way of love, that is an obstacle to love. And she says, our work is to let love take up all the space in us and to open that space in our hearts. So I feel like the memoir is revealing everything that I had to move through that was not of love, really, to get to the place of being able to more fully embody that in my life. And that's a work in progress. I don't know when the book will be out. I am in the process of sharing the draft with different people, and we'll see what happens. But thank you for asking. I really appreciate it.
I think that's something that quite a few of us are going to want to put our hands on. That's a very it's both vulnerable and also really well timed. I think in the States right now, I think there is a lot of searching. People are seekers, and I feel that the ways that we can help demystify some of this and sort of really bring it down to that human component. I think that that's some very special and important work, and not only the work of your both of your lives, but in a seminal piece like this, I think I, for one, am going to make sure that I get a copy when I know that it's out.
Well, thank you. It's really a woman's path.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, would you feel comfortable, given the fact that this will air on the solstice, would you feel comfortable doing a bit of a guided meditation as we sort of end our time together and sort of move on to the rest of the evening? Because I want to be mindful of the hour.
I'm happy to do one. Trudy and I talked about it and decided I would do this a short meditation for you, knowing that people are also doing all kinds of other things. And I want to tell a little story that leads into it.
Great.
Because the only public monument, government sanctioned monument that I know in the US is on 4th Street in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. And it's there commemorating a mystical experience of the great Christian mystic writer Thomas Merton, who was in his monastery there, trying to be holy and prayers and living in community. You think monasteries are fun, but it turns out that you have to live with other people in them. So they're not as easy as you think. But anyway, and he was walking down the street and he said, then it came to me, I could see the secret beauty behind the eyes of everyone walking past. He said, the divine behind each one of these eyes. He said, there we were trying to be holy in the monastery, and I realized that it was right in front of me with each person going by. And the only problem was, he said, I knew that if we could see each other that way, there'd be no more war or cruelty or greed. The problem would be, I wanted to get down and worship each person as they went by. So this was a seminal turning in his life, like Trudy's birth giving and seeing the world create itself through the bodies of women in this amazing way. The practice then is to see the secret beauty, and I think it really fits with Seva Foundation. So we'll do a little meditation, if you will, a kind of reflection. Let yourself sit quietly, and if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. And take a couple of long breaths. And the practice is related to the practice of mudita, of joy. It's one of the factors of enlightenment in Buddhist teachings to actually invite the quality of joy no matter where you are, like the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu conversing with all the troubles in life, laughing and saying, so much has been taken, why should we let the joy disappear? So let yourself quiet and think of someone who you love. Picture them, somebody easy or you care about. It's sort of an uncomplicated relationship, or where it's natural to feel a kindness and love toward them. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a caring relationship. And when you visualize or remember or sense that person, now let yourself imagine their happiest day as a young child, 3 or 4 years old, laughing and tickling and rolling in the grass, and, the joy that was born in them, the child of the spirit. And as you see that, offer them a blessing. May your joy come forth for your whole life. May you not lose that connection with joy. May you see the joy in all whom you meet. And now they imagine that this one could look back at you and see you and wish the same for you and picture you as you can remember one of your happiest days as a child, even in a tough family. There were days as a child of play and joy and tickling and laughing and running. And that's in you. And they see you. And they say, may this joy increase. May you never lose touch with this joy. May the joy, the child of the Spirit born in you, stay with you for the whole of your life. Now finally, let yourself picture the faces of the tens of millions of people that Seva Foundation has touched in their life. Many, many who were blind and unable to see. And what it was like when the bandages came off and they could again see. And how that joy, that moment, wow, I can see again. The child of the Spirit awakens in them after the darkness of not seeing. And what a gift that is. And realize that you carry the possibility not only of your own joy and seeing that in others, but also supporting others who've lost their sight or lost their way or lost their sense of the mystery and the sacredness. To see it in them and to do that which fosters it outwardly and inwardly, you can be the agent of joy. And so here in this winter solstice, in the darkest night, feel the light of that child of the Spirit, of the eternal child and joy in you, and sense how you might bring it alive in yourself and with those you love and in the world around you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you too, Kate, and thank everybody at Seva for bringing light into the darkening of vision. And it's so auspicious that you're doing this during Hanukkah, which is the festival of lights,
Yeah.
and at the solstice, right? When the earth tilts on its axis and we start moving toward a little more light. Yeah, thank you so much.
And Christmas and Kwanzaa
And Eid
And eat and everything.
yeah.
we're all in this great turning together. And Seva is really one of the lights in our life. So I too express my gratitude.
Oh, I mean, on behalf of, I can tell you that my team and the supporters of Seva this is a gift. And I want to thank both of you for your gift of time, your love of humanity, and for being gracious enough to help really make something that is really profound and can be very complicated accessible to those of us that are seekers and aren't sure. And I just wanted to thank you both for today and taking the time to be with us. I think this is something that I know that people are going to enjoy. Jack, your guided meditation at the end is just very special. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Really a pleasure.
All right. Be well and enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.